Jai Anilo Premadano Karma Kacho Gopi Jana Balama Divana Gopi Jana Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, Text 48. Tiraskrita vipralabdaha shaptaha shipta tata api nasya tat pratikuranti tat bhaktaha prabhavo ti Tiraskrita vipralabdha Tiraskrita vipralabdha Shabtaha shiptavata api Shabtaha shiptavata api Nasyatat pratikuranti Nasyatat pratikuranti Tadbhakta prabhavotihi. Tadbhakta prabhavotihi. Tedaskrita vipralabdaha. Shabdaha shiktakshata api. Nasya tat pratikurhanti. Tadbhaktaha prabhavotihi.
Taskrita vipralabdaha Shikthahata api Nashyatat pratikurvanti Madbhaktaha prabhavotihi Taskrita vipralabdaha
Ladies. Tina Krita, being defamed. Vipralabdaha, being cheated. Shaktaha, being cursed. Shiptaha, disturbed by negligence. Hataha, or even being killed. Api, also. Na, never. Asya, for all these acts. Tat, them. Pratikurvanti, counteract. Tat, the Lord's. Bhaktaha, devotees. Prabhavaha, powerful. Api, although. He, certainly. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. Purport. Rishi Shamika also knew that the Lord does not forgive a person who has committed an offense at the feet of a devotee. The Lord can only give direction to take shelter of the devotee. He thought within himself that if Maharaj Parikshit would counter-curse the boy, he might be saved. But he knew also that the pure devotee is callous about worldly advantages or reverses. As such, the devotees are never inclined to counteract personal defamation, curses, negligence, etc. As far as such things are concerned, in personal affairs, the devotees do not care for them. But in the case of their being performed against the Lord and His devotees, then the devotees take very strong action. It was a personal affair, and therefore Shamika Rishi knew that the king would not take counteraction. Thus, there was no alternative than to place an appeal to the Lord for the immature boy. It is not that only the Brahmins are powerful enough to award curses or blessings upon the subordinates. The devotee of the Lord, even though he may not be a Brahmana, is more powerful than a Brahmana. But a powerful devotee never misuses the power for personal benefit. Whatever power the devotee may have is always utilized in service towards the Lord and his devotees only. I'll repeat the translation. The devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. This verse spoken by the sage Samika Rishi, he's speaking to his son, explaining the position of a transcendentalist. It reminds us of the statement made by Lord Shiva to Parvati, Narayanam Namaskritya Narayanam Namaskritya Namaskritya. No. Huh? Ah, that's the verse, yes. That Lord Narayan's devotees are so great that even if they are cursed, they're sent into hell, they do not protest. Even if they go to heaven or hell, it is the same. This situation is seen here. Personal offense against a devotee, an offense against his person. The devotee will not seek to counteract that offense. The distinction is made by Prabhupada between an offense made against the person and an offense made against the Lord. And I will say something further about the Lord and his devotee preferences. Obviously, if the Lord is offended, a devotee takes exception and does everything possible to protect the reputation or the siddhanta, the reputation of the Lord, or proper siddhanta. We see this, of course, in numerous cases where Srila Prabhupada spoke very strongly when someone challenged the position of Krishna in any way, especially in India, if there were programs and someone would come and try to question. Prabhupada would be very, very stern in his response, protecting Krishna's reputation or position. On the other hand, if a devotee is personally defamed, just like what Chitraketu was personally defamed, unnecessarily cursed, is better to say. He was unnecessarily cursed by Parvati, Lord Shiva's wife. Chitraketu did not counter curse. He did not do anything to try to neutralize it. In fact, he was prepared to go, and he did go, into the body of a demon, Vritrasura. And therefore Shiva proclaimed the glories of a Vaishnava. Just see how glorious they are, that even if they're cursed, they don't try to defend themselves. Maharaj Krishna here is understood. It is understood he will not try to counteract this curse, because this curse was put on him in his personal, you can say, in his personal, position or personal, on his own account. It was not put on him in terms of his position as king or emperor. This is what I want to make a distinction of. Had the position of the king been threatened, then Maharaj Parikshit might have defended himself. In other words, if a king is attacked, he will defend. But he wasn't being cursed or attacked as the king or the emperor. He was being cursed or attacked because of a personal, what the young boy, the unqualified Brahmin boy, considered to be an insult against his father by an individual. Now he was cursed as an individual rather than as the representative of the government or the head of the god. Similarly, we see, for example, of course, there's a lot of instances of tremendous toleration. Haridas Thakur tolerated not only verbal abuse, but he tolerated being beaten, whipped, flogged through 23 marketplaces. Prabhupada cites Jesus Christ being crucified on a cross, nailed to a cross, stakes driven through his body, and tolerated it, saying, "Forgive them," praying for their forgiveness. Haridas Thakur prayed for the forgiveness of those who were beating him. Maharaj Parikshit certainly was no less an individual than these great personalities, and therefore Shamika Rishi understood he will not do anything. Actually, he wished that Maharaj Parikshit could have counter-cursed his son, because by the counter-curse, at least, immediately the reaction would have come upon his son. Now, this was a very dangerous position to offend such a great personality. What would his son's future be? And what could he do? What could Shamika Rishi do on behalf of his son? Because how does one get relieved from this type of cursing? As it's stated here, the Lord himself does not take any type of action in terms of forgiving someone who offends a Vaishnava. The Lord will not forgive it. He does not forgive him. You cannot pray to God. You cannot pray to Krishna if you offend a devotee. Please forgive me. Because the only thing that the Lord will do is that he will not forgive you, but he'll recommend, and he does recommend in Scripture, that you have to beg forgiveness from the Vaishnava who was offended. So that's the only way to get relief in a circumstance like this. You have to pray to the Vaishnava who was offended. Now, in a case such as where Maharaj Parikshit had been offended in terms of his being the king or emperor, that's another matter. Then he would have retaliated. And similarly, we see that an acharya, like Prabhupada, sometimes when his position was threatened, then he would act like fire. He would retaliate. For example, when people try to question the use of the title Prabhupada, Prabhupada became very angry. And here's something where his position as the acharya was being questioned. When some of his disciples, either intentionally or unintentionally, omitted the word founder acharya along with Prabhupada's name on the cover of some of the publications, Prabhupada became very alarmed. And when during one of the Ratha Yatras in San Francisco, Prabhupada was not shown proper respect, being offered a place on the chariot, he became very disturbed. Now one may question that, why is that? If he's so humble, etc., why doesn't he tolerate it? And the answer is because he's not being offended on his individual behalf, but he's being offended on behalf of the Sampradaya. He's being offended in terms of his position as a representative of God. Krishna is being offended, and so are all the previous acharyas. When you offend the spiritual master or the acharya, it's a simple line. So his defense at the time was a defense of the entire Sampradaya authority. And therefore, it's not a sign of Prabhupada's, it's not a sign of lacking of tolerance or any of these other qualities, tolerating, not being forbearing, tolerating defamation, cheating, cursing, disturbance. Sometimes we get cheated. Of course, again, this is a very fine line here, because if all that you have is Krishna's money, and you get cheated, then ultimately it's Krishna's being cheated. Prabhupada gave the explanation that when you're managing your own money, you have to manage it very carefully. But when you manage somebody else's money, you have to manage it even more carefully. In other words, when you're protecting your own property, you have to take great care. But when you protect, and you're entrusted with the protection of another's property, then it doesn't belong to you. It's even more heavy a responsibility. So if we have what we have is Krishna's, if actually it is Krishna's, then how careful we have to be not to get cheated. And Prabhupada was very vigilant. When he would oversee his finances, he was very particular about every penny. I recall when we were in Delhi, he had to show Prabhupada the accounts. I was at GBC for all of India at the time. It was 1971. And Prabhupada wanted to see the accounts, and we discovered that there was a discrepancy in accounts of about 2,000, rupees, which at the time really wasn't that much. It was about, I think it was 8 rupees to $1, so it was about $250. So Prabhupada said, well, how are you going to make up this discrepancy? So I was at a loss, and I said, well, perhaps I was at a loss on what to do. I said, perhaps we can collect the money. He said, no, you can't collect the money. He said, because when you collect the money, you're going to have to issue a receipt. So you're not going to get any new money out of it. You're going to have to issue a receipt. It's still going to remain as a loss. You can't go out and collect the money and say to someone, give me a donation and use it for this, because when you get the donation, you have to issue them a receipt. So as soon as you issue a receipt, it won't make up the loss. So then he said, you're going to have to bring the money from some other place. He said, the mistake is not just, the mistake may be the treasurer's, but the temple president, the person who oversaw the treasure, is equally responsible, and you as the GBC are equally responsible. So you all have to make up the loss. You can divide the loss in 3 parts, and you have to get the money from some place where you would not have to issue a receipt. So I had to write home my mother to send me $75. I couldn't figure out where else to get the money without issuing a receipt. So this is the position. Of course, nowadays people are not having the advantage of Prabhupada's personal supervision. So I'm sure you'll find that there's time and time again discrepancies, but nobody ever tells the temple authorities, you're going to have to make it up personally. If they were told that, you can be sure they would be very, very vigilant. And that's the fact that if the leaders are very strong, then there will be much less irreligion. The problem is that when there's weak leadership, irreligion becomes very, very prominent. It's not a fact that liberal management or liberal leadership actually, and liberal I mean to say, accommodating of promiscuous activities will be an improvement. It is. You have to be very strong and vigilant to see that there is no irreligion allowed. And getting cheated, letting Krishna get cheated of his money is a type of irreligion. Neglect, if the devotees neglected. We think another example is when Ramharshan was sitting and giving the class, and Lord Balaram entered. And what happened? Yeah, Ramharshan did not get up to offer Balaram respect. So Balaram felt what? Neglected. He felt neglected. What did Balaram do? He killed him. Even though Ramharshan was a brahmin, he killed him. You're not supposed to kill a brahmin. Namo Brahmani Devai, Go Brahmani Hitaya Cha, Jagadhitaya Krishna, Govindaya Namo, Balaram Govinda is not different. Balaram is the protector of the Brahmins. He killed the Brahmin. Not only did he kill a Brahmin, he killed the Brahmin who was sitting and giving class. That's a pretty radical move to make. But why did he do that? Because he could understand this person has insulted the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just like you saw how tolerant Krishna was when Shishupal was insulting Krishna. And we see how, Abhima wanted to kill Shishupal. Krishna was tolerant, but eventually what did Krishna do? He cut off his head. So at a certain point, if the Lord is offended in that way, the Lord may take action to protect Dharma, because that is the business of the Lord. It comes, yada yada hi dharmasya dharmir bhavati parata yutanam dharmasya tadakmanam sijamya. He comes to protect religion against irreligion. So devotees have the same mission. It is our duty to do so, but we have to do it in a very different way. We cannot cut off people's heads, nor are we powerful enough to take a blade of grass, and slap someone's face with it and make them lose their body. Balaram could do. We can't do those things. We have to do what Nityananda Prabhu recommended to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in regard to Jagai and Madai. When Jagai and Madai offended Nityananda and Haridas, Lord Chaitanya was prepared to kill them. But Nityananda Prabhu said, not in this incarnation. You should not kill physically in this incarnation. Kill the sin. Kill the sinful tendency. And so we have to kill the sinful tendency through our preaching work. And that is really what Sankirtan means. Sankirtan is an aggressive act. Lord Prabhupada said, when I came to this country, I came as an aggressor. I came to make war on sin, on the material energy. And similarly, when we perform Sankirtan, we are, like warriors, we are making war on sin. And that's why sometimes there's resistance. That's why it is difficult. It's not easy to do Sankirtan. Because when you attack Maya, the kingdom of Kali, the kingdom of Maya, you should expect that there is going to be some resistance. How that resistance comes, we are devotees, therefore we believe that everything, not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Lord, not a tire gets punctured without the will of the Lord. You don't get a speeding ticket without the will of the Lord. You don't blow up your engine without your own foolishness. I don't think we're going to say for the will of the Lord, you blow up your engine. But still, it might be that he certainly accommodates you if you want to be that foolish. There are enough Sankirtan devotees that have been that foolish, that they have blown up their engines by not putting water in it or some other such nonsense. Oil changing, you're going to do all kinds of stupid things. Falling asleep at the wheel, driving into tree trunks, and other types of ignorance. So one has to be very careful, because anything is possible. Krishna will allow you to remember him, and he will allow you to forget him. He will allow you to serve him nicely, and he will allow you to make all kinds of foolish mistakes. We do see everything as the divine hand of the Lord acting. So we have to understand that if we want Krishna to act on our behalf, then we have to be very devoted. And therefore, this morning program and the whole practice of sadhana bhakti is meant to ensure Krishna's cooperation. I mean, Krishna will cooperate, but maybe we should say it's meant to ensure our cooperation. Krishna has no problem cooperating, it's we who have the problem. And without this type of morning program, what happens? You lose your intelligence. When sadhana bhakti becomes weak, you lose your intelligence. That's, this whole chain of reactions, contemplation of the objects of the senses. I want this, desire, developing, attachment, frustration, anger, loss of intelligence, loss of memory, bewilderment, fall down. So, to protect ourselves against such fall down, sadhana bhakti is necessary. To make ourselves strong, what does that mean? To basically get Krishna's help. That's what it means, to get Krishna's help. We have to practice sadhana bhakti. We are not that strong. We are not very strong. We don't have the type of determination that some people do. As I was saying on Sunday, I was reading this autobiography of Gandhi, a very powerful individual. He was super powerful. I don't think there's nobody in this room with the kind of karma that this person had. He could take vows that would make, it's a very difficult vow. He took a vow, he took many vows. One vow he took, I will only eat 5 different types of things in a day, and I will only eat once a day. Took a vow for years, he just ate fruits and dates and nuts. You just can't do the vows that he did. And he's very, very, very tolerant. Extremely tolerant. He could get insulted, he could get hurt, he could get beaten. He took so much. So this person has super karma. But I was thinking, and what is different? Why is it that, there's something lacking? Because Prabhupada makes certain statements. And I thought that ultimately, if I have to say, because this person is so much more powerful and qualified, at least, than I am. And yet, there was one difference. I got Prabhupada's mercy. He didn't. I got the devotees, pure devotees' mercy. He didn't get, at least, it doesn't appear to him that he got, in the same way that we get a pure devotees' mercy. So it seems to me that no matter how fortunate and qualified one may be due to karma, there is also the element of mercy. And this is Prabhupada's kindness on the world. Of course, one might argue that, there's something from your past. Bhakti Sukriti, this person has the quality of attracting bhakti, whereas someone else may have the quality of karma Sukriti or jnana Sukriti. And pious Sukriti, good fortune, coming to them of jnana, of knowledge, or coming on account, or tapasya Sukriti, perhaps, but not bhakti Sukriti. So one could argue that the devotees of ISKCON have that bhakti Sukriti. That is coming from past life. Something has happened in their past which has enabled them now to attract the good fortune of the association of a devotee or the devotees, whereby they get the seed of, faith. The faith, the seed of bhakti is sprouted and turned into nurture, and faith develops. Because he didn't have that same degree of faith, not at least in a particular devotee of the Lord. And so, he was constantly making experiments in truth. That's the name of his autobiography, Experiments in Truth. And Prabhupada says, you experiment when you have not found out the truth. You have to experiment to find it out. But the absolute truth is Sri Krishna. And it's interesting because Gandhi was born in a pure Vaishnava family. He was born with, at least his mother was a great, great devotee. She was a strict Vaishnava. Vaishnava was very, very strict. But obviously he could not hold the faith which he, he, as a child, always had a secret, tilak, the whole thing. His mother would go every day to the temple. His mother would do chaturmasi very strictly. She was a super strong devotee. But he did not place the same degree of faith in Krishna that his parents did. So that means some lacking in bhakti sakriti. Of course, you have to be careful, as you saw on Sunday, that even slightly saying anything will offend, especially the Indian community. I'm extremely offended. Because, in their minds, he is a Mahatma. He's a great soul. And, it's like that person said, no one has ever read the Bhagavad Gita as much as Mahatma Gandhi. And Prabhupada's statement on the other hand was that from the very first verse, Mahatma Gandhi made a mistake in understanding the Bhagavad Gita. Because in the first verse, the Bhagavad Gita says, we have assembled on this battlefield to fight. Whereas Mahatma Gandhi used the Bhagavad Gita to say, don't fight. And Prabhupada said, that's not the message of the Bhagavad Gita. The message that Krishna wanted to give Arjuna is, you should fight. Of course, someone could, exculpate the situation, defend Mahatma Gandhi by saying that his method of fighting was very intelligent, given the nature of his own personal, physical, and psychological condition. He used a weapon of non-violence as a type of violence, which there's something you could use that as well. You could make a case for that he did help to get the British out. But I was reading one article about him last night, and the author of the article actually was the same person who I got an award at SMU called the Harvey Alpert Award. Alpert was a professor that said he's written one book in which there was one article about Mahatma Gandhi. And he makes the point, however, that what got the British out of India ultimately was the threat of the insurrection of the naval forces and other military forces, which is exactly what Prabhupada said. Prabhupada said that what drove the British out of India ultimately was that threat of physical violence. Otherwise, they were prepared to tolerate all the toleration. And it might have driven them out of the country. So, anyway, just an interesting point, as I was reading this, I thought I would share with you about what is our fortune. I think we have to say that, understand it from both sides. There may be some bhakti sakriti, but there's also the mercy of the devotee. And that mercy of the devotee is more powerful than any good karma can ever be. And I think every one of us will attest to that fact. That we may have some, meager qualities, good qualities, which, cause us to be proud, but ultimately we know how impure we are. And yet still, somehow, here we are, engaged in, worship of the Supreme Personality of God, the absolute truth. We know the absolute truth, we worship the absolute truth, we come face to face with God, and you can speak with a practitioner of any other religion, and either they deny that God has a face, or they say it's very hard to see it. And yet, even the Upanishads say it's very hard to see it. Isha Upanishad, the prayer is, please remove that glaring effulgence so I can see your form, your effulgence, your face. But here we are, looking at the face of God. And again, there's a lot of guests who come in here and they look at the altar and they cannot see the face of God. They see, but they don't see. They look, but they can't see. They don't see God as we are seeing, because they have no faith. So definitely faith is important. And that faith is the sprouting of the Bhaktivedanta beach. That's what it means. Everybody has a seed of devotion within their heart, but by the association of a pure devotee, it makes that seed start to fructify, start to become fruitful. So association of devotees is essential, and that is what the whole idea of the society of ISKCON is. It is meant to give association. And sometimes we see people criticize ISKCON. There are so many critics of ISKCON these days, especially the biggest critics, of course, are not outside, or let's say the biggest critics are not devotees, but they are devotees of former devotees of ISKCON. They are the main critics. And they may lambast ISKCON in so many ways, but the fact is that here is a situation where every day we get the association of devotees. And when they, try to resurrect their idea of what ISKCON is or what it should be, and they make their own communities, etc., one of the things is that they don't come together like this. They don't get the daily, the constant association. And so they're not as strong, they don't get that advantage of constant devotee association. This is a very powerful tool, weapon, or very powerful influence. You keep coming daily into the contact of the devotees, it's very powerful. Your false ego, is down, and your real ego goes up. I'm a devotee. That's why, just like I thought to myself, I have to give more classes because I spent so much time at that university or in studies that I may forget who I am. I don't want that would be a disaster. If I forget who I am, what will happen to so many people? I don't want that to happen. So I thought I'd better to give more classes where I act in a position of my real nature, which is to be Krishna's devotee. Because we have to find ourselves in so many circumstances which aren't overtly devotion. So many of you have to do work or jobs, etc. These are not things which overtly remind one of Krishna. It can be done with remembrance of Krishna. In fact, we have to. I was listening to a lecture when Prabhupada was saying, if you drink water without remembering Krishna, you're not a devotee. So we have to actually learn to remember Krishna in each circumstance, in each simple act. It's not that you should only remember Krishna when you're chanting at your beads. You have to remember Krishna when you're balancing the accounts. You have to remember Krishna when you're going to work. You have to remember Krishna when you're going to school. You have to go remember Krishna when you're going shopping. You have to remember Krishna when you're fulfilling your morning bathing rituals. That's Krishna consciousness, 24 hours a day. That's called samadhi. Otherwise, it's just not that, I remember Krishna when I pray, and the rest of the time I'm in Maya. That's not Krishna consciousness. Then one will be able to be tolerant and forbearing in the face of all of these things. It's not that you can just become successful without this continuous effort of Krishna consciousness. We'll stop here and ask if anybody has any comments or questions. Narita.
I have two questions. One was, sometimes we speak about strict management within our society.
Strict what?
Management, and how to organize the devotees. And then a lot of times in those roles, there's an opposition that only Prabhupada could say or act in that way.
Yeah, there's some truth to it. I'll repeat it for those who forget. Sometimes we say the manager should be strict, and other times we say only Prabhupada could act in that way. The real problem is that for a leader to be effective, he has to be accepted as a leader. If people don't accept the leadership, then what is the use? You can say anything you want, it will have no effect. So one of the advantages that Prabhupada had is it was an absolute authority. There is no single absolute authority in this movement anymore. The GBC is the final authority of our movement, but they're a collegial body. A body cannot act in the same way that an individual can. Prabhupada could make so many exceptions. He could do so many things as an individual. He was also the guru. He was the guru of everyone. The GBC is not the guru of anyone. They're not gurus. The GBC body is a body. It's an administrative body. So they don't have the kind of surrendered allegiance that Prabhupada did. And therefore, there's no wonder that they can't do the same thing that Prabhupada could do. Nor what to speak of the temple president. Temple president during Prabhupada's time was backed by the founder Acharya of this movement. Now, the temple president may be backed by an individual GBC. In those days, the temple president was backed by the individual GBC and the founder Acharya directly. He could appeal to the founder Acharya, who was his guru, and sometimes he did. There were cases where the GBC representative would want to remove the temple president would complain to Prabhupada, Prabhupada would say, leave him alone. Now, of course, I'm just showing you the differences. There are differences. It's not the same. Because there is complete allegiance to Prabhupada. And you don't get that complete allegiance anymore. I don't say that again, it's like everything has it's two-sided. There's a reason why Prabhupada got complete allegiance and why some authority now may not. I'm not saying people necessarily must have that same allegiance. But, there's reasons why they may not. I don't say that that's a good situation. Still don't think it's a good situation. Someone you were appreciating. We were discussing about our three young Matajis who had come from Alaska, and you were saying that you appreciated how they were saying that Early Bhakti Prabhupada was a pure devotee, which I would agree with. I don't disagree with that. He's a very, very exalted devotee. But the point you were making was that because they have that faith in their teacher, they can learn so nicely. So it's both that he's qualified and they have that faith. Both things have to be there. The person should be qualified and there should be faith. And it generally happens that if the person is qualified, there will be more faith. But that makes it makes the business of teaching a lot easier when someone has that type of respect for faith. Similarly, it makes the ability to lead much easier when the persons or the followers are willing to respect the leader. Another question? Yes?
Shri Gurudev, in the purport, it says the power of a devotee is more powerful than that of a Brahman. I was hoping you could explain
that. Yes. A pure devotee, Krishna is obedient to a pure devotee's request. He may or may not be obedient to a Brahman's request. A pure devotee knows Krishna, a Brahman may not. A pure devotee is much more elevated than a Brahman. There are Brahman Rakshasas. There's no such thing as a Vaishnava Rakshas. Pure devotees Brahmins are much easier to come by than pure devotees. Pure devotee can deliver the universe. A Brahmin cannot do that if that's all he is a Brahmin. The Brahminical culture, in any case, is not even possible in its pure form anymore in this age. Vaishnava culture is possible. Pure devotee is more possible. Yes, Nadia.
Is it a fact that when Mahatma Gandhi left his body?
Oh, I don't know how to come to that part.
Oh, you
I can't try it. I can tell you right now, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't studied that. When I get there, remember to ask the question. You can ask the question about a month or two from now, and I'm not sure everything.
I was wondering, as far as our ISKCON society and being the embodiment of Mahatma's mission and the success of the mission, when it says that the channeling spreads the rays of the benediction moon. What are the rays of the benediction moon? How do we see that?
I will do some research and answer your question. I have to read some commentaries. There's some commentaries on Shastra. saw someone here. I'll read some. Lashmi,
Sometimes a devotee would become angry with another devotee, and you might say something that sounds almost like a curse. Should that devotee be very afraid? Because according to the purport, the devotees are more powerful than a devotee.
Yeah, especially pure devotees. So I guess if someone says a curse, a devotee of Vishnu says a curse on you, should you be afraid? Probably. You should be afraid. It becomes more fearful according to the level of advancement of the person. But then again, people who are advanced generally don't issue curses. So, probably to cover yourself, it's better to be afraid and beg forgiveness. Then if they still don't forgive you, it's not very likely that their curse is very powerful. Because they should forgive you.
I'm thinking of one case where a devotee advised another devotee, if you marry that person, you'll for sure go to hell. They said it in such a strong way, and they went ahead and married.
So you're saying, is that a curse that the person's going to go to hell? That's not a curse. That's not a curse. That's not a curse. That's just reading the future. That's not a curse. Huh?
That person is probably afraid that will come true.
Well, that may be. You may be afraid that person, but what you're afraid of is that person has the ability to see into the future. It's just like, you see a car rushing down the street. The traffic's rushing down the street here. The traffic's rushing down the street there, right? And you tell your daughter, if you step out of the street, you're going to get hit by a car. Is that a curse?
Probably not.
No, it's not a curse. It's just that you can see the future. It's the same position. It's not a curse. The person was able to understand because of the modes of nature, etc. This person, if you marry this person, the person is a certain nature, form, condition. They're going to drag you into illicit and bad activities, which are going to cause you to go to hell. That's what they're saying. But the thing is, it's not a curse, it just means don't marry that person. Unless it turns out, unless the case is that the person can see accurately the future, then you can ignore what they say. It's not a curse, though. Good job.
I'm curious about the whole idea of curses, how they work. I mean, we all, because of the scripture, believe that these things, in fact, happen, that someone utters something and then a week later the snake bird comes because of this utterance. How is that happening? How is that those magic words of that curse going out there and actually coming back a week later?
Well, Krishna is like, Krishna and his deputed representatives and agents, his energies, are aware of everything. I mean, what it presumes is that we're living in a conscious universe. The reason why we're confused about such things is that we have been taught by material knowledge and material teachers, materialistic teachers, that this is an unconscious universe, that matter is dull and inert, and that's all that there is matter. And therefore, what power, where is the connection between a word uttered today and an event that takes place a week later? On the other hand, if it's a promissory note. If I have money in a bank account, and I'm sitting in front of, and we're in a village bank account system, I'm sitting in front of the banker and I say, a week from now you can pay so-and-so 100 rupees. The banker hears and he says, okay, and he pays a week later. Where's the connection? My word, simply my word, heard by a person. So in the same way, if we accept or acknowledge that there are agents of the Lord who populate the universe and hear, in other words, they're specifically able to hear the words of Brahmins and devotees. And when a Brahmin and devotee says something, a particular demigod hears. And the Supreme Lord, who's sitting in the heart as Paramatma, certainly also hears. So there are agents who sanction whatever is said and done. and they connect the event that takes place later on. I mean, it's not hard to understand how. I mean, why talk about curses? Tell me how it works. That, I punch something on my computer, or people send out signals, radio signals, and they connect. How does a radio signal work? Where's the connection? I mean, their analogy, material science explains what the connection is. But it's not a tangible, physical, well, it is tangible, it's just tangible in another sense, but it's not gross physical connection between a radio signal and the reception of it. And there's millions of different types of things like this now that are going on, which are almost mystical, apparently mystical. But it's not any different. The curse is a subtle form of energy. It's a mantra. Mantras are powerful. How is it that when you say Hare Krishna, Krishna hears it? How can Krishna be in his name? All these things, the same idea.
Today you mentioned that some of the devotees may have in the past somebody come into this life, but isn't it also giving this mercy and association of good?
Yeah, well, that's what I said. I said that it's a combination of both. Bhakti Sukriti means, well, I said it's Bhakti Sukriti and Kripa, mercy. The devotee is merciful, especially the Madhyam devotee and Uttama Bhakta, but Madhyam Bhakta and Uttama Bhakta in the Madhyam position. They dispense mercy. A devotee's business is to dispense mercy to the faithful. So it's a combination of getting the mercy of the devotee of the Lord and perhaps having Bhakti Sukriti. Combination. You don't get it?
Exactly. And it seems like it's the same in the past as it is. That the mercy is never independent.
Mercy is independent of Bhakti Sukriti. Mercy is independent. There's only one, the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur discusses this, and he says that the reason for mercy coming is that the Lord orders the devotees to be merciful. It's not because you have something coming to you that it's not mercy. Mercy is independent. You didn't get it because you deserved it. You got mercy because of the sweet will of the devotee. But at the same time, we can say someone may have that Bhakti Sukriti. But it's not in itself that Bhakti Sukriti causes mercy to come. You can say Bhakti Sukriti makes you favorable to the mercy when it does come. It makes you receptive to the mercy. It allows you to develop faith. Bhakti Sukriti does not necessarily attract mercy, but it makes you amenable to the mercy when it comes. I'm going to stop here because it's getting late. We've got to do things. Srila Prabhupada.